I think uh, there's an intellectual argument to be made that, when you trust people, they're on your side, you're just going to be more forgiving. The left has obviously done it a million times. We watched it during the whole Biden administration. So many stories that should have been big weren't because the media is on their side. And now
Just
MAGA.
sorry, Paul, sorry to interrupt. Not just the Biden administration. We've watched it for 50 years.
Oh, 100%. I
Yeah,
was just
yeah.
talking more recently.
No, I know, I
I'm
know,
not,
I know, I just want to emphasize
yeah,
that I've heard
but
from people, I'll just say, I've heard from people this week who said what they're doing, what they did was stupid and arrogant. And I will not criticize them publicly because I'm still so outraged at what the Democrats did for the last 50 years. Like
yeah. And I would say,
that cut and dried.
like for me, I can admit that it's egregious everything that happened, and I don't want to see any of them fired or anything unless it gets worse.
Yeah.
And like what Adam said, where he just said that Trump picked loyalists versus people who are that have merit to do these jobs. I think that's kind of a ridiculous comment considering what we just saw the last 4 years. But here's my question, because I want to get away from that. I had a comment. I wanted to ask Batya, because I love Batya. Batya, what you did, that tariffs answer you had on Bill Maher the other week, unbelievable. You stunned him, and it was great. I wanted to ask you, Batya, because you say you're a leftist MAGA. I wanted to ask you what brought you over to kind of where now people would consider you far right. And the reason I'm asking is because as a Bush Republican growing up, I now disavow like the war of the neocon structure, all that, and which is funny seeing it now on the left. And I feel like I've grown more centered since the Bush years, since even the Clinton years, and now we're all far right. And so I just wanted to hear kind of your story on that real quick, or the quick version.
Thank you, Paul. Great question. Batya.
Thank you so much for the question, Paul. I'm going to give like one of the things, because obviously I had Trump derangement syndrome in 2015 and 2016. So it's obviously been a real journey. It's like a lot of things, like there were like initial cracks. But I'll tell you the first thing I remember as like an initial crack in what made me go from being like a woke, liberal, anti-Trump person, so there was a study that came out from Yale in 2018. And I remember where I was sitting in my office when I first read it, because it like just shook me to my core. And the study found that there was a difference between how white liberals and white conservatives talk to people of color. So I see this headline and I'm like thinking to myself, like, oh yeah, let's see. I bet they're really racist, those conservatives, And so I start scrolling, I'm reading, I printed it up. I'm like reading this article. And guess what? It turns out that white liberals, when they talk to Blacks and Hispanics, they dumb down their vocabulary, and white conservatives don't do that. And it's called presenting lower competence. And I remember looking at that and thinking, first of all, immediately recognizing everybody that I knew. And I remember thinking to myself, and we call them the racist. This is the most racist thing you can do. You see somebody has like darker skin color than you and immediately assume they need to be protected from your vocabulary. It's an insane, but of course it's totally true that white liberals do that. And I had this moment where I realized like, this is not just an indictment of character. This is an indictment of the entire platform that the Democratic Party is built on. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to lose all of my friends. And I did. But I took that. I wasn't ready to deal with it. I was like, this is so like earth shattering. Like my life is about to end. I put it in a drawer. I closed the drawer and I said, I'll be back in 3 months. I'm not ready to deal with what this means for me. But I just remember so clearly the feeling of like the scales just dropping from my eyes and like seeing an indictment of myself and my entire milieu and like immediately recognizing the truth of it. And that our like accusation of the right was a confession. Like that was that moment where I was like, oh my God. So that was the first of many cracks, but like a very powerful one.